Hi, I'm Kathryn Walker, and I'm the CEO of Revitalist Lifestyle and Wellness. Today I'll be speaking about mental health in the metaverse and also how we can improve access to veterans, athletes, and also first responders. So this is an exciting, evolving topic that many have heard of, but a lot really don't understand the importance of understanding these concepts. So the metaverse, as we all know, is starting to evolve in a way to where it's going to make a global presence seem like it's your neighbor next door, which is a great thing. Very exciting for a lot of individuals who may otherwise not be able to access different parts of the world. So seeing this evolve brings a lot of hope, not only for evolution of, but also the understanding of mental health and increasing access to individuals who may otherwise either avoid the topic or never really seek out the help. So by us providing access to mental health in the metaverse, we're providing additional access to individuals in the privacy of their own home to where they'll be able to not only seek out in ways that they're more comfortable, but they'll also be getting and receiving effective treatments and methods to where we can actually help individuals with their own mental health while they're at home. So what we have actually created in the metaverse is a clinic called Revitaland. Revitaland will be its own entity, its own land, to where we'll be able to provide pretty much everything that a mental health clinic, a brick and mortar mental health clinic provides. So we'll be utilizing therapists, providers, even meditation, different types of yoga techniques and such, to really help access and engage individuals at home that are just looking for a higher quality of life. What I've noticed as I'm a provider in the space, so I'm an anesthesia provider, I'm also a psychiatry provider, but I've been in the outpatient space now for about 4 years, even though I've been working in the healthcare field for about 20. One thing that I've noticed is when we seek help in the outpatient space, it seems to be very unilateral. So we go to a provider, and then our help becomes what that provider is offering us. And what I've noticed is a lot of individuals that do seek help, if that one provider doesn't align with their values and their ethics and their understanding or the ways that they would like to be treated, then that person actually will stop seeking help for their mental health. So that's something that we really focus on at Revitalist, is providing access for all in the understanding and validating aspects of cultures. Which brings me into the athletics, the veterans, and your first responders. So my background, I told you I am a provider. I also played sports growing up. So I played at a Division I school for a little bit when I was in college. And one thing that I've noticed being a medical provider, also kind of with the mentality that I have of working in higher acuity, critical care, understanding the athletic plans and such, whatever coaching aspects that we have as we are athletes, I've noticed that veterans and first responders and athletes are a similar culture. And everyone may think I'm crazy when I say that, but what athletes, veterans, and first responders do, every day they have a plan. When they start a game as an athlete, they have a plan. The team has a plan. As a veteran or an active military, when they always have plans. They go over their plans. They have plans to, if it goes this way, what do you do? How do you respond? As a first responder, they all have plans. So every day they get on the job, yes, they're walking around, but they have a plan on what to do when a situation comes to the forefront. So it's controlled chaos per se, to where we know the different steps to take as we need to take them based on the presentation that we have. One thing I've noticed in the outpatient world is it seems there's not a lot of space for the understanding of that for veterans, athletes, and first responders. More so, a lot of times we may be grouped into different types of categories to merge us into different types of cultures. So what I just said may make zero sense, but basically, as a athlete, as I was growing up, I was very aggressive on the courts, and so I played 5 sports, but I was there to win. I didn't care who got in my way. My goal was to win. So therefore, I got in trouble sometimes with the or the referees or whatever, but I was dedicated to win. That was my goal. So you could say that's aggression per se in the sport, but there's other types of athletes that do have aggressive behaviors. Yes, a lot of us know those people if we worked in the sporting arena long enough, or we've been those people. And I actually had a very good conversation with a therapist who is extremely well versed in therapies, multidisciplinaries and such. And her interpretation of my aggression was more so that I had underlying anxiety, underlying anxieties, which was not the case. So trying to hear that aggression of an athlete is underlying anxieties, it didn't align with what I felt and I knew growing up as an athlete. Instead, what I knew growing up as an athlete is I was determined and dedicated to meet the goal of winning no matter what. And that's a very similar mindset when you look at veterans and you look at first responders. We don't care who gets in our way when we're trying to meet the goal that we know we are intended to meet. So understanding that and hearing, one person's perspective, oh, well, it's anxiety or it's underlying childhood trauma or whatever else, versus no, these individuals have been trained to execute to get the goal. That's a common misalignment that a lot of our athletes and our first responders and athletes or first responders and our veterans get brought under that umbrella. So therefore you have these individuals who have been trained to perform in a very, very high pressured situation that are now being told their performance strategies are because they're anxious. So again, those are two separate parts that just they don't align for those individuals versus the normal civilian world. So when I say civilian world, I mean somebody who, if you're looking at first responders, say they respond to a gunshot wound. Okay, so you walk in onto a scene, right, and then you start doing what you need to do to save that person's life. Saving that person's life is your goal at that time. There's a lot of people in life who they never have, they will never want to, and if they have to, it's going to be probably a significant trauma for them to respond to someone who's had a gunshot wound, or the bottom of the 7th, and when you're supposed to perform in a tied game and everyone's, the game's on your shoulders, you got to perform. Those are significant pieces that athletes and veterans and military know how to respond to. And if they don't know how to respond, they're not going to be in the game much longer or in the profession much longer, because those are the techniques and the strategies that we have to have in order to fulfill the role that we've been trained to do. So when I say training, I think that's a really big, significant piece here. Athletes, military, first responders, they've all gone into the field to be trained to perform under high pressured situations that may occur daily. They may also occur multiple times a day. They may not occur at all. So hearing that, understanding that is a beautiful thing, because that's what makes athletes, first responders, and veterans so precious in our society. We are the ones in the trenches. We are the ones that people love to watch, and we're also the ones that people love to hate when we mess up. But these are the leaders that have been trained to be the influencers for others, either for entertainment or literally life-saving techniques, or for ultimate protection. I mean, that's what our veterans are there for, is for ultimate protection. So, hearing all this, understanding all of this, and looking at the evolution of the metaverse with the Revitaland, we have created a clinic to make it to where it will be culturally sensitive, not only to our athletes, our veterans, and our first responders, but to everyone. So one thing I've noticed is while in the medical field, we feel that we are very all-encompassing, all-welcoming, all-understanding, we have a lot to learn. So we say that yes, and we want to be that yes. But there's a lot of culture sensitivities when individuals come to us, say they do come from a third world country per se. That individual's culture is going to be very different than someone who comes from Louisiana versus California. Even growing up in rural areas versus, more metropolitan areas, those are all going to be different cultures that we have to understand and value and make sure that we invest in that person. So that's one thing with Revitalist that we really, really focus on, and I really push for our every person who's involved with us, is you look at the person, you hear the person, you don't impose values, you don't impose anything on that person. You hear the person and you try to hear what that person's trying to seek out. So if we want to go further into my backstory, I grew up in a very small rural town in East Tennessee. And in that town, there were a lot of preconceived notions, there still are, of expectations for life. All of which I've never merged, I've never flown well, right? So my whole life it's been, to where I've always felt unique, different, while I did sports and academics and all the other stuff those ways, I'm still learning the evolution of all these different pieces because I've never felt like I fit into the puzzle I was intended to fit into. And knowing that, feeling that, growing up from a small town to where people would ask me, are those your real teeth? Do you wear shoes? Do you actually go to school? Different pieces like that. That really hurts your common, your not your common core. We won't go to math. We won't say that piece. It hurts your core values as a person, or it gives you the impression of your core values as a person. So core values is something that at Revitalist that we really focus on to help develop and invest in that person so that person's core values can be heard, they can be empowered, and eventually they can improve their quality of life. So with all of this, with Metaverse, with veterans, with athletes, with first responders, these are all commonalities, but they're very separate, all of which should be understood, valued, invested in, but then also understanding what each of us are as a person, and that we're students every day, and that we're learning every day, and that we shouldn't take everything that we hear from professionals or communities, we shouldn't take all of that as the ultimate truth, because the ultimate truth of the person that we are lies inside us. The truth evolves. The truth evolves based on the additional science and information that we're able to gather in order for us to make a better hypothesis with the data that we have. So one thing with mental health, especially if you're looking at mental health clinics in the metaverse, like most people are going to say, oh, that's crazy, that could never happen, or they're going to say, veterans and first responders and athletes, they're all people. They're right, they are people, but don't group everybody together, because we have to understand whose common values or what core values do each of these individuals have. We need to understand, is it the training of the profession? Is it the culture of which they come from? Is it, we need to look at the individuals. What goals do they have as a person? And I'll tell you, working with a lot of mental health individuals, the goals that they have as individuals, they don't know. So one thing that I've noticed a lot of by speaking to individuals is when you start struggling with your mental health, and I like to say this a lot to individuals, but when you start struggling, you have two things, right? Let's keep it simple. The brain is oh so overly complex. It's beautiful, but let's keep it real simple. You start struggling to where you cannot categorize and you cannot prioritize effectively. So what does that mean? It's very simple in my head because I've seen it several times. But the categorization, the prioritization is when you get out of bed. So when you talk to individuals a lot who have been struggling with their mental health, a lot of individuals you'll see, it's either hard for them to get out of bed or it's hard for them to go to sleep. One thing I've noticed is when the hard part to getting out of bed is because either the world feels so overwhelming or they don't know the first place to step. And that's when I say the categorization, the prioritization is, it feels like there's a lot on everyone's plate and they've lost the sense of what's the next step that I take in order to start clearing some of these tasks off my plate. So what do? They go into a sympathetic nervous system response and they freeze. And they can stay in that response per se to where they just feel like they're surviving and they can't see past, they lose all comprehensiveness out around them, right? So their family's like, they're not engaging anymore, they don't like me anymore, they're not doing all these things. They're not doing that because they're not able to, because they're struggling. They're struggling in their own mind. Their own mind's your worst nemesis, I guess. So when they're struggling in their own mind that way, they stop. So your sympathetic nervous system, a lot of people may not know what that is, but if you don't know, it's your fight or flight system. So it's your fight, flight, freeze. So at one time, at any time, right now, if something were to happen right now, my sympathetic nervous system could kick on because it's my, it's going to save my life, right? Right or wrong, it's just going to save my life. So I always look at it as a triangle. You can see I always like pictures. Everyone who knows me knows I like pictures. But your triangle. So your triangle with your sympathetic nervous response is your fight, your flight, or over on this side, your freeze. So at one time, give a situation to anybody, they're going to go to one of those three responses. That's it. Fight, flight, freeze. And it could be the exact same situation that's presented, but the individuals who are responding to it may respond completely opposite. So you're going to have some people who want to fight the bear, you're going to have some people who play dead, and then you're going to have some people who run. And actually I did see a bear and I ran, but it was about 8 feet away from me and it was waiting on me per se. But anyway, that was a different situation. But fight, flight, freeze, right? So when you have those situations that happen, your brain, I call those significant events. And when you have those significant events, your brain holds on to those for one reason or another. I'm expecting it's the evolution of the behavioral pieces of almost like muscle memory, but again, there's not much data on that yet. So when that happens, fight, flight, freeze, some people almost get stuck in that. One, they can't get over it. Two, it keeps looping, the rumination piece. So rumination is a thought that just keeps looping and looping and looping, and it unfortunately usually has emotions attached to it as well. And when those emotions are attached to that looping, it's just bad, right? That is when you hear people say, I can't get out of my head, I can't drop it. We see that a lot with teenagers actually, and usually teenagers, I've noticed when they do try to kill themselves sometimes, it's because they want their brain to stop, to give them a break. And fortunately for us, that ruminating piece is able to be addressed, especially with substances like ketamine, and then the other psychedelics. So it's actually able to be addressed. It's able to be disconnected. So in your short-term memory, you have emotions and objects that are attached, right? So right now, as I'm speaking to you, you are sitting there in a physical environment, and you're also having the emotional response at all times, and they're merged together. We don't see it that way, but they are. And fortunately with psychedelics, what psychedelics do is they detach those two things. And when they detach those two things, as you're utilizing the substance, that's why we really have therapists involved with a lot of this. It disconnects it, and when it disconnects it, you're able to view yourself from a third person view, feeling a first person response. So what that means is, individuals, so we give ketamine infusions a lot. Individuals with this who have the constant rumination of circling and circling and circling, it disconnects those two things. And what you're able to do is you're able to sit there and you're able to look at what your body will typically do. Say if you have anxiety, and when you have anxiety, you start breathing real fast, or you start like rubbing your hands on your pants, or you start tapping your foot. While you're receiving the infusion, your body physically will start doing that. It's muscle memory. Your muscle memories start coming to the surface, and when they start coming to the surface, you're not actually feeling the anxiety that's associated with the muscle memory. You're able to see, you know what, my foot's tapping like it usually does when I get anxious. But then you're able to analyze that tapping of the foot. And when you effectively analyze it and understand what your body is doing, your brain processes it. It takes it from your short-term memory, where your emotions and your objects are attached to each other, and it puts it into your long-term memory. When it puts it into your long-term memory, your emotions are no longer attached to the situation. You go from feeling like a victim to feeling like someone who is triumphant. We call it triumphant survivor per se, but someone who has not only accomplished that task, but you have succeeded in that task to feel empowered about situations that you may have been through in the past. So that's why this beautiful thing of ketamine and psychedelics and such are going to be such a wonderful thing, especially looking at the metaverse piece, because the neat thing when you look at medications in the brain, the reason medications work in our brain is because we have receptors that are able to understand those medications. So they're able to take the data, and they're able to process the data in order to make a function. Meaning that a lot of the medications that we actually take, we're able to endogenously produce utilizing certain skill sets. So the medications that we take that have an effect on our body, we're looking at the brain to stimulate the brain utilizing techniques that will make the pharmacy portion of our brain, per se, make them produce more of those techniques, or more of those substances to give you an additional function. So serotonin, right? So if you look at SSRIs, your serotonin reuptake inhibitors, your SNRIs, those guys deal more with serotonin, norepinephrine and such. Those are all neurotransmitters in our brain, and we take those. We take those because we've told ourselves that we have a chemical imbalance. And do we? I'm sure maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know. Are we just not dealing with the core values that we have as individuals? Maybe, I don't know, right? These are all things that we still want to really focus on and evolve as we understand the science more. But there are certain strategies on how you can increase your serotonin naturally, your norepinephrine naturally, your dopamine naturally. We also have one of the strongest hallucinogenics in our brain. So when we say, oh, hallucinogenics aren't natural, Right. Probably the way that we actually do look into these different pieces of substances that we give. It may not be completely the natural approach because we're either giving way too much or way too little, and we're not looking at really the body's natural production and how much, how do we look at those different pieces of production. So basically, we're able to, all the substances that we take orally, we're able to look at those, and we're looking at different techniques in order to help us produce those naturally occurring substances on our own without feeling like we constantly have to take something every day because we just weren't made right. We have a lot more control than what we know. And the more we understand about ourselves, the more we evolve into the people that we want to be. So this has been a lot of material given at one time, but I won't take you too long. But basically, the point of this talk today is the metaverse has a lot of additional value that we don't even understand yet. So it's something that I would highly tell you to look into, to understand, and then also to constantly try to understand the neurologic capacity of the brain, because there's so much there we just don't understand yet. And the more that we see and understand that our brain is the one who is leading us, not our finger, not our feet, it's our brain. And the more that we can understand the scientific nature of how does our brain not only affect the functionality of our body, but how does the brain also affect the behavioral aspects of the body? And how do we strengthen the brain's different structures in order to not only give us a better or a higher, I guess, emotional intelligence, but also gives us, greater empathy for others, allows us to be more culturally sensitive, not only to the individual cultures based on race or sex or whatever else, but also based on the professional cultures, because those are our cultures. I'll tell you, when I quit sports when I was 20, I had to learn how to shift into the civilian world, and that's a huge transition that a lot of athletes have really significant trouble doing because their identity is an athlete. So with all of this, with understanding all of this, I would encourage everyone that try to be more open, try to be more understanding, try to understand that we're just now getting to the point that we know a lot in medicine, but a lot of those were neurologic theories, especially in the mental health world. Most of the things that we know about the brain are very theoretical in nature. They're not very scientifically based. And since Yale made the miraculous discovery of utilizing ketamine on the brain back in the late 1990s, we're able to look at real-time evidence. And this real-time evidence is scans. We're able to draw labs. We're able to look at all these different things to where there's a lot of hope for a lot of individuals out there right now. Whether you are a civilian, you're not a first responder, you're not a veteran, you're not an athlete, but you are a person, and a person that has value. So understanding that, I would encourage everyone to constantly try to not improve themselves, but to try to be more understanding and learning of themselves as we all evolve in this life. So thank you for having me. Hopefully as Revitaland comes to fruition, we'll be able to unveil more of that. It's in the alpha testing phases right now, so hopefully the beta phases. So if anyone has any interest in wanting to test during the beta phase, you can always send Revitalist an email, and we can get you on that list for sure. But if you're a veteran or an athlete or a first responder and you feel like maybe your base isn't as strong as it should be, and you go back to the categorization and the prioritization of tasks, and you're seeing that maybe you're mixing a lot of your home life into your work life, or your work life into your home life, or you just don't feel right, or what you used to be, that's always a reason to reach out. So we have a lot of individuals. While we're just across 7 states, we do have the capacity to help across all several state lines. So always reach out and try to seek the help that you feel like you may need. We're not going to tell you that anything's wrong with you. We're going to help you to try to understand more the person that you are, and help you to invest in that person's values and common core there, to where we can help you to flourish more so in life. So thank you for having me today. Gatherverse is a really super awesome piece that I'm excited to see how it evolves as well. And the Mental Health Springs Wellness Summit, that's a great thing. We need to do it all the time. So thanks so much. Hope everybody has a great day.